We are in the days of COVID-19 and the whole world is impacted by it. In these days of COVID-19, it is very easy and automatic for us to fall into despair and depression. We need to take certain initiatives and actions which can help us to move toward peace and growth. So let us try to discuss these steps which we can take, which can promote peace and well-being in our lives.
Yeah, we are truly in a difficult time right now, unprecedented perhaps even. So there's a lot of things that can, cause anxiety, different things people maybe are doing in their daily life. I just think if you could maybe go into some of those things.
Yeah, so definitely there are many things that might be causing us fear and anxiety. I would like to mention three things that can cause us fear and anxiety. The first one among them is social media. These days most of us are in our houses and we are not engaged in many of the physical activities. So most of us tend to use social media a lot. And so we might be using WhatsApp, Facebook, other websites and many other channels. And these ways of social media today are pouring a lot of content, lot of information on COVID-19 and what's happening around. Perhaps this information is too much for our brain to absorb and remain calm. And so a lot of spending time on social media can cause us anxiety and fear. And so I think it's really advisable for us that we reduce social media as much as we can and have maybe only one or two reliable sources of information on COVID-19 so that we are up to date but not overwhelmed by a lot of information given on social media. And further I would like to add that a lot of information available on social media may not be reliable. We don't know how much information is authentic and helpful. So it's really nice to have only a limited number of reliable sources.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. I mean, with all of us at home, trying to self-quarantine, there's just that temptation to just, sit there and keep hitting refresh and really fixate on something like maybe statistics and really just overwhelms us. After a point, it just isn't that helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, our brain can absorb only a limited amount of information, and that is also we need to intake different types of information, not only one kind of information. So if you take only negative information or unpleasant information about COVID-19 and whole of it, then certainly that can have negative impact on our lives and can create anxiety and fear. Yeah. Yes, Daniel. And the second thing that we need to avoid is rumination of negative stories and content. These days we are hearing a lot of unpleasant stories, negative stories, and of course many of them are true, but we need to avoid the rumination of these stories, rumination of these content in our mind and also when we speak to one another. If we keep on ruminating, repeating this content again and again in our mind and while we converse with our family members, this content is going to become stronger and stronger, and definitely then it can cause anxiety and fear. So we need to avoid rumination of negative and unpleasant content connected with COVID-19 and focus on some of the pleasant things that we can do and our family members are doing, so that we can counterbalance the negative content with positive stories, positive experiences, and that will certainly help us to feel good and move ahead in our life.
That's such a good point. I think that really what's on all of our minds at this point is just the fear of getting COVID-19 and the
Yeah.
reality of that is a possibility.
Yeah, so Daniel, you are true. There is a lot of fear around, and I mean, situation is so grave that it's normal to have fear, but inappropriate amount of fear is going to affect us negatively. So, of course, we do need to acknowledge the situation and impact connected with the situation. But any amount of inappropriate and extreme fear will be harmful for our life. You know, when human beings are afraid or face any fearful situation, let us say seeing a snake, so sometimes we respond in two ways, like flight or freeze. Yeah, and yeah, depending on situation, both may not be good ways of responding to fear. Excessive fear in our context now can freeze us, can freeze us, and that means that our body system, our immune system can freeze. It can slow down, and if it freezes, then there are more chances of us getting affected by COVID-19. That can be more harmful because our immune system will be low. So we need to kind of in a reasonable way face the situation without trying to or without experiencing inappropriate fear. Fear of COVID-19 is much more dangerous than COVID-19 itself. So definitely that is something that we need to keep in mind.
It's probably better to just take, possible actions that we can do, very practical things, right?
Yeah, just we can do what we can do. So we take the practical actions within our limits and we face the situation with courage.
Excellent. So we've talked about some of the things to avoid, some of the things to be careful of in this time. But let's talk about some of the positives. Like what are some things we can do during this time?
Yeah. So Daniel, definitely, I would like to suggest some ways which can help us to experience peace, growth, and health. So these are not exhaustive ways. Definitely, our viewers can add few more to the list, but I would definitely suggest these ways, which I think are important for us during these days of COVID-19. The first thing that I want to say is we need to acknowledge anxiety and fear. Certain amount of anxiety and fear is normal at the face of such grave situation. But if we do not acknowledge our anxiety and fear, if we keep denying or ignoring, then it will be difficult for us to overcome it, because we cannot overcome anything if at the first place we do not recognize it. So it's important that we recognize so that we can move through it ahead.
Yeah, you make a really excellent point. I mean, we don't want to be like an ostrich with our head stuck in the sand, ignoring the difficult reality here. So what are some healthy activities that we can engage in instead?
Yeah. So Daniel, that one thing we need to do during these days more than ever is engaging in some kind of physical exercise. Physical exercises are a good way to boost our immune system, and physical exercises also produce chemicals of happiness, and these chemicals are serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine. And so when somebody does exercise, these chemicals in the brain are stimulated. They help a person to reduce stress and pain and also to feel good. So definitely physical exercise would be something that we should be doing during these days.
Yeah, with all of us indoors right now, it's, I think, really important to find a healthy way to use up all that energy we've got built up. Can you give some general guidelines?
Yeah, so I think it would depend on maybe on the lifestyle of an individual and also on the age of a person. But I think most physicians suggest that we exercise 20 to 30 minutes a day. I think that should be good for an average person. And let me continue with the third thing that we could do, sleep. So we need to have good sleep these days. I'm not a sleep doctor, but even my own sleep doctor has advised me to sleep at least around 7 hours to 7.5 hours per day. So I think sleep is really important, because it is during sleep that our body not only rests but also it engages in repair and maintenance work of the body and mind. So if we give proper sleep to our body systems would be in good condition, our immune system will be better, and we will be able to face any infection that might come across to us, Daniel.
Awesome. That sounds like some really good ways to really help our bodies to fight this disease, to really prepare ourselves for it. That sounds like a really good rule of thumb.
Mhm.
Is there perhaps something we could do with our families now we have all this more time together?
Yeah, definitely, Daniel. Because there could be a tendency for us to dwell on a lot of negative thinking, and so it's better to find some games to engage in. Definitely, we cannot have outdoor games these days like football, basketball, but certainly we could find some indoor games that we can play with our family members. So some of these games could be like snake and ladder, chess, apples to apples, and some other games. So these engaging in such games will help us to focus our attention on fun, and also it will help us and our family members to spend some time in entertainment and fun. Yeah, and Daniel, I also would like to suggest that during these days, most of us have more time because we are not going out for social meetings or programs. Many of us are not working in a way going to office, but some of us are working from home, and so we have perhaps more time than before, and it will be a good idea to maybe join in watching some fun movies and videos with our family members, and that will be a good time together. There is an anonymous saying that laughter is the best medicine. So I think it's really important for us to find ways to laugh. I personally like watching Mr. Bean and Charlie Chaplin, and I'm sure people will have their own favorite comedians and funny characters,
Yeah.
which they could watch and laugh.
Sure. Yeah, it seems like a great time for lighthearted comedy. That's for sure. That's an awesome suggestion. I know I always enjoy a good game of chess or checkers with my family members. What are some things that perhaps we could do, especially if we're alone during this time?
Yeah, so many of us had hobbies probably in our childhood or early adulthood, which we no longer do. I think it is the right time to pick up our hobbies once again. Our hobbies could be singing, dancing, writing, painting.
Previously, we had talked about avoiding really focusing in too much on negative things. What is kind of the flip side of that? That we can do something that's positive.
Yeah, hobbies are a good way to boost our creativity and build a stronger relationship, first of all, with ourselves and also with our family members, because some of these hobbies also can be done together with our family members. Let us say singing together. So definitely finding our old hobbies once again, and maybe if needed developing new hobbies would be something that we can do during these days.
Those sound like some really great activities, really healthy ways to spend this time we have together, especially with our families. Are there any sort of coping skills that perhaps we could work on during this difficult time?
These days it is important for us to develop coping and adapting skills. For example, let us take the situation of isolation. In this situation, one can start worrying and lose hope, or one can find ways of adapting and coping with this challenge. So maybe what one can do is one can start connecting with his or her family members, especially those who are away from the house, and contacting with friends, maybe by audio or video calls. So that way, instead of worrying and catastrophizing about isolation, we can start adapting to it and making life more happier. Breathing exercise is another important thing that we can do. Many of the studies and researchers have shown that breathing exercises helps to calm our mind, body and soul. So it is really important that during these days of anxiety, we take some time to practice breathing exercise. It can be a just simple exercise of sitting at a quiet place in your house or in your backyard and just starting to breathe gently and gracefully. If you prefer, you could close your eyes or you could do it with your open eyes.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a really good way to deal with this difficult times. I'm wondering where you see the role of prayer in these moments.
Daniel, I believe there is no greater power than prayer. And so in our moments of prayer and meditation, we can connect ourselves to God, who is the source of all life and healing. In our moments of prayer, God can strengthen and heal us physically, mentally and spiritually. So I think it is really important that we connect ourselves with God through various ways, maybe in our family or maybe doing something online with our friends.
Yeah, I think it's so important in times like this to just remember that there's a higher power than us. We're not in control of everything, and I think it's so awesome to recognize that through prayer, and I think it's so important, like you said, to connect with family and to come together with perhaps our communities that we can't be with physically right now through something like an online live stream of a church service we like to join normally in person, and to just stay connected that way. And it's one of those little blessings, that we can see in this difficult times.
Yeah, Daniel, you mentioned the word blessings. And I think it is really important for us to count our blessings during these days. It can be very tempting for us to dwell on the negatives, on what is going wrong and the challenges and struggles we have. But I think it is really important that we start counting our blessings. And if we count our blessings, we'll be surprised that we have more reasons to be happy than to be sad. And the way one could do it is maybe mentally. One could just start counting one's blessings, or maybe could share the blessings with a family member and also could hear the family member do the same. So I think it can be a good exercise that we can do either individually or with our family members. Or maybe one could even start writing a journal, just the blessings each day we have.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a very healthy use of social media, as we had discussed earlier, to really spread positive messages rather than negative. Thank you for your time, and these have been some really great tips on how to get through this difficult time.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you, my dear viewers, for being with us. Stay safe, stay blessed.